let's jump right into it. First turn of the game. The attackers are the Romans, so they're going to go first. And the first thing we do during a player's turn is he takes care of his movement. After that is shooting, where both sides attempt to shoot at each other in an order determined by the active player, which in this case would be the Romans. And all the effects of that are simultaneous. At the end of shooting, any losses and routes or cohesion losses are taken into effect. After shooting is combat, and again, in the active player's choice, you resolve the combats one at a time, and all the effects of that are simultaneous. So they take effect at the end of the combat as well. After that becomes route and pursuits are taken care of, and finally we check for victory in case somebody's won the game. And then it switches to the other player. He does the same process. So that's a turn sequence. Very simple and straightforward. It's similar to DBA. So we're starting with the Romans. Let's see what they can do. The first thing you do is the commander, who is a competent commander. In other words, he adds +1 to his CP roll. And the CP roll is the first thing you do. That's the equivalent of pips in DBX. And it stands for command points. It's basically how many units you can do things with. It usually takes 1 CP to do something with a unit. Groups usually take 1 as well, but can cost extra CP if it includes certain troop types. So let's first roll his CP and see what he gets. Now he does get a +1 on this. That'll be totaled, and then the result will be halved, rounding up. The net result is the CPs. And he rolls a 1. Horrible roll. And we have +1 to that. Total is going to be 2. Halved is 1. Rounded up, and it's going to be 1. Surprise. So what we'll do here is we'll take one of these little yellow rubies to indicate his CPs. Easy to remember, but there it is on video. Okay, so he's got 1 CP. Now, just to show you how this works, we're going to move up those velites and try and get him close to the enemy. He's only got 1 CP for his army, so we'll take care of that right off the bat. Now, the velites, which are right here, there's 2 separate units. They are a group of 1 because they're perfectly lined up. They have a normal movement rate in open terrain of 3 unit distances, otherwise called UDs or UDs. And they're going to move their maximum of 3, and that's going to cost 1 CP. So let's do that. Put my little marker there. I put it like this so it's lined up properly. That'll be 2. And they'll have 1 more, which will take them to right there. So that's the Romans' move. Now, commanders, generals, also have a free bonus CP that they can use for themselves. They can use that to rally their unit or move their unit and rally other units, I believe. But he's not going to use that right now. He's going to sit in the back, and that's going to be that. Now, one thing we need to pay attention to is there is a command radius here. In the case of light infantry, they can be as far away as, I believe, well, it depends on the commander's ability. This is a competent commander, so his normal command radius is actually 6 unit distances. But if it's light troops, like these velites, they can be twice that away. Otherwise, it's going to cost an extra CP to move them in the next turn. Now, they're well within the 12 unit distance max, so that only costs 1 CP. So that's the Romans. They're finished. There's no shooting. There's no close combat, and obviously no one has won yet. So we're going to go right to the Seleucids and see what they do. The turn shifts back over to the other player, which is the Seleucids in this case. So the first thing we do is we roll his CP, as usual. Let's see what he gets. Now he's got a brilliant commander, which gives him a +2 on the roll. And remember, we add the 2, and then we're going to divide by half, rounding up. And that's the number of CP. He gets a nice juicy 2. +2 is a 4. Half rounded up would be 2. So he's going to have 2 CPs for the turn. Not very good, but we'll see what happens. Now we're going to take a look at this from the standpoint of groups, because he does in fact have a nice little substantial group here of troops. To move most effectively, you want to form your troops up into groups and move them for 1 CP typically. But there are exceptions to that. And one of those exceptions is unmaneuverable troops, which all of these units here are considered unmaneuverable, including the scythe chariot. Now, let's take a look at this. Now, normally mounted troops and foot troops can't be grouped together. Okay, the exception is the elephant. He is considered mounted, but he is allowed to form up with foot troops. And by the same token, he's not allowed to form up with cavalry or other mounted units. As you can understand, you know, horses have a big fear of these big wild beasts. So you can imagine. In addition, scythe chariots have a little special rule. It's basically they can't form groups with anyone, so he can't be counted. So looking at this, this is a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units with the elephant and 4 pike blocks. So I could move these guys as a group for 1 pip, normally. However, there's going to be a problem with that because all these troops are considered unmaneuverable according to the rules. Pike blocks, you know, they're big, unwieldy things, so they're difficult to maneuver properly. Elephants, a little bit hard to control, so they usually are going to take a little bit more effort to command to get to do what you want. Now, how that rule works is that these unmaneuverable troops, if they do not move their full distance forward, either as a group or together, it will cost an additional CP to move them. Normally it's 1. In this case, if they didn't move their full, it would cost them 2. Now that also applies, or doesn't apply, if they move into contact with the enemy. So it would only cost 1 CP in that case, as they move into contact, regardless of the distance traveled. So I think we're going to do that. We're going to spend the 1 CP to move all these guys their full distance, which has to be at the rate of the slowest member. Now the elephants move 3. The heavy foot moves 2. So we've already got a problem already because now the elephant can't move his maximum, which means that's going to cost a CP if I include him in this group. So let's go ahead and move these guys to 2. Now this includes the elephant, remember. And that'll put them all the way up here. And I could just take my CPs off, which ends the turn. Well, not necessarily ends the turn, because if you remember, commanders have their own little bonus CP that they can use on themselves and the rally troops. So let's see if we want to use that or not. So there we go. He spent his 2 command points getting these guys forward into action. Let's try and push away those velites. Yeah, so he has his extra bonus here. He's going to use that CP to basically move forward. Not much. Maybe a UD and a half, and there he goes. He's all good. So that would conclude his part of the movement part of the turn. Next would be shooting, which there is none. If these velites were within 1 unit distant range, which would be like this, for this guy, he'd be able to shoot, which is not the case. They have a range of 1 UD with javelin. So that would end shooting, and there's no melee contact, no close combat. And obviously nobody's won. So now we can go to the next turn and repeat the whole process. We're going to start off with the Romans again. So that's movement in a nutshell, and let's see what happens next, folks. Maybe we can get some troops into action here.